Okay, Year 9, so as you continue your studies of Macbeth throughout this term, we need to be looking at analysing language within the key scenes. Now, I will note here that Year 10, you may also look at these lessons later in the term too, because they are analysing key scenes, and your exam is extract focused, and then you need to compare the extract to the whole play. So we need to be able to analyse the language that Shakespeare uses, and that is what this series of about 20 lessons and 20 key scenes will look at. Now, we're going to start with Act 1, Scene 1, so the first scene within the play, and we know this is when we first meet the witches. So our knowledge retrieval today isn't actually a quiz. I know we normally do a quiz, but it's actually going to be a brain dump. And all that is I just want you to write down everything you can possibly think of to answer the question, what does Shakespeare want to reveal about the supernatural through the play of Macbeth, and why? So really simply, what does Shakespeare want to say to a Jacobean audience about the supernatural? What I want you to do is I want you to pause the video just here and start to think about what messages, what conceptualised points Shakespeare was wanting to convey about the idea of witchcraft and the supernatural. Write it all down, and then we'll look at some possible answers and some things I think you should have included from your previous home learning on the next slide. Okay, so Year 10, hopefully you paused Year 10. Well, this is for Year 9 and Year 10. I'll stop addressing you by your year group. So hopefully you paused the video for 5 minutes and you wrote everything down that you could think of that what Shakespeare was wanting to reveal about the supernatural. So we're just going to go through some possible answers here. Now, the first one I've underlined, the play is ultimately a warning against engaging with the supernatural. You should have had that. If you do, give yourself a big tick. If you don't add that into your brain dump, make sure that you know that the play is ultimately a warning against engaging with the supernatural. Now, we've got 4 other bullet points here. These are things I think would have been really beneficial for you to note down. Shakespeare wants to remind his Jacobean audience that no matter how great the promises from the supernatural seem, so when they promise kingship to Macbeth, that seems great, but Shakespeare wants to show us that engaging with such a malevolent and evil force will always result in tragedy and our own downfall. So basically, the promises of greatness are themselves a paradox because they cannot be true, because this evil force will always corrupt us. So hopefully you had something along those lines. If you want to write my bullet point down, brilliant, but just make sure that you've got something along those lines on your brain dump. Now the third one, this is really important. Shakespeare wanted to scare a Jacobean audience and show a Jacobean audience that the supernatural distort nature and they distort the natural order of the world. So they distort how God wanted things to be. They distort how naturally things should be. And he wanted to say to us, he wanted to scare us, especially a Jacobean audience. He wanted to remind us that they will distort the natural order, and he wanted us to be scared by that. Shakespeare obviously wants us to suggest that the supernatural corrupts the good within us, so they turn us into evil, malevolent creatures too. And finally, really important one, King James is thought to have been greatly involved in Shakespeare's works. He was significantly involved in the playing company that Shakespeare wrote for. So it's really important that King James actually felt threatened by witchcraft and the supernatural. Therefore, he wanted Shakespeare to discourage the Jacobean audience from engaging with it. Okay, so you can give yourself a mark out of 5, but obviously it's not as clear-cut as a quiz. We will return to quizzes in our next lesson. But I wanted us to think about, as we look at Act 1, Scene 1, which is all about meeting the witches, what was Shakespeare's messages? What are those higher level conceptualised points about the supernatural? Okay, so why are we going to do the following series of lessons then? Well, the following series of lessons are going to focus on language analysis, the text crunching, and they're going to be looking at key scenes, which could come up in your exam, and also key quotes from those scenes. So whilst you are watching these lessons, you should annotate the extracts in your booklets, you should make notes about the key quotes, things you could say about these extracts and key scenes from the play. They will massively help you as you move to restudy this play in Year 11. And you should also make flashcards for key quotations. Well, why would we do that? Well, because in your GCSE exam for your Shakespeare question, you will be given an extract from the play and given a question about either a character and or a theme. And to answer that question, you have to start with the extract of the key scene you are given and bring in other evidence, so other key quotes from the play as a whole. And of course, our conceptualised knowledge from our earlier lessons on things like why Shakespeare was writing, what his messages were, what influenced his writing, what he was trying to achieve. All of those big ideas will massively help us get those highest grades too. So where should we start then? Well, of course, it makes sense to start with Act 1, Scene 1, which is a very important scene in the play, and it is also, of course, the opening scene to the play. So if we look at where we are in our narrative arc here, we can see that this scene is in the exposition. It is basically the setting, the scene. And it's a nice simple scene in the sense of what happens. So we've got this plot synopsis at the side here. A storm rages and 3 witches suddenly appear. The witches are speaking in troic tetrameter, which is a very unnatural meter of speech. And they are using what we call paradoxical language, contradictory language. They say fair is foul and foul is fair. That cannot be true. It is in itself a paradox. Now, the 3 witches agree to meet again on the heath, where the battle now raging, the battle that Macbeth and Banquo are currently fighting in, ends. And it is here that they plan to meet Macbeth. Now, some key terms, some key subject-specific terminology for analysing Act 1, Scene 1. Now, you will know what some of these are. Some of you will know what all of these are. But I just want you to take a moment because you need to know what these are before we move on. So we've got pathetic fallacy, which of course is where the weather is used to reflect and set the mood. We've got paradoxical language, which I've just spoken about, where there is an inherent contradiction. Cannot be ill, cannot be good. That is a later quote from the play. It's an inherent contradiction. Something cannot be both fair and fair is foul and foul is fair. It is something which is a contradiction, a paradox. Rhyming couplets, of course, I imagine you know what those are, but it's a pair of successive lines which have full rhyme. Now, troic tetrameter, this is likely to be new to many of you. And this is simply an unnatural meter of speech where a long syllable is followed by a short syllable, or a stressed syllable is followed by an unstressed syllable. Now, that's all very complex, but all you really need to know at GCSE is that the witches speak in troic tetrameter, and that is an unnatural meter of speech which therefore portrays the witches in an unnatural way. So they appear as this unnatural, otherworldly force, which is a direct contrast to how the nobles speak, which we'll look at later in the play. Okay, make sure you do know what those key terms are. Perhaps put them on a flashcard. On the front of the flashcard, key terms for analysis of Act 1, Scene 1. Put the terms on the front of the flashcard, then on the back put the terms and the definitions so you can self-test, because those terms are very key for understanding Act 1, Scene 1 and being able to effectively analyse it. Okay, so now line by line annotation. Now you can see the scene is really quite short and I've only picked out a few key quotes, but these are the things you could comment on, and there's so much we can say. Now I've put a little reminder here. Don't forget, key quotes on flashcards. Be organised, be prepared. You will thank yourself for it in Year 11, both Year 9 and Year 10. If you have a collection of Macbeth key quote flashcards that you do now, whilst you've perhaps got a little bit more time at home to be studying and preparing, I promise you, when you get to Year 11, you will be so thankful to have those flashcards. So, I'm going to talk quite fast. I probably already am talking quite fast through these line by line annotations. So, the stage direction that there must be thunder and lightning. So we instantly begin with this pathetic fallacy when the witches are around, okay? Now this stage direction is repeated whenever the witches are around. And this pathetic fallacy creates this bad omen, almost a sense of foreboding that perhaps serves to warn or alert the audience that the witches are a dangerous force that corrupt the equilibrium of the earth and the good in the world. Now I particularly want us to zoom in and analyse that word thunder. Could, if we think about that's the very first stage direction in the play, could that word thunder symbolise, foreshadow how a storm is brewing and perhaps how the witches are bubbling up to a crescendo of destruction? Okay, so then we come in thunder, lightning or in rain. Now there is a sense of inevitability here. The triple, which is just a list of three, and the rhetorical question, of course we know what those words are, a question that doesn't need to be answered, create a sense of certainty that the witches will meet again, and that again their presence will be cloaked by this pathetic fallacy, by this symbolically bad weather, that their bad omen and their destruction will continue. And overall, the bad weather which surrounds them seems to symbolise the terror and chaos they will bring. I think that's a lovely way of summing up the pathetic fallacy there, that it seems to symbolise the terror and chaos that they will bring. Right, now when the battle's lost and won, it's paradoxical language. And it seems to give the sense that no good can come from this, because when the battle's lost and won, well, it will be lost by someone and won by someone, but it adds to this sense of confusion. It's very it suggests that no good can come from engaging with them, because if there is something good to come from it, there must be a negative consequence as well. The idea of a battle could foreshadow the danger and the violence which unfolds later in the play. It could foreshadow what is coming later. And the paradox of lost and won seems to symbolise Macbeth's journey. With each small victory he gains in his quest to fulfil his over-ambition and his unchecked ambition, he makes a further loss. So that I really like the idea that lost and won symbolises that Macbeth both wins and loses, but ultimately it will be a tragic loss for him, because with each small victory he makes a larger loss. There to meet Macbeth. Now, this raises the question, doesn't it, of fate versus free will. Are they seeking out Macbeth? Are they casting a spell over him? Is his tragic trajectory already mapped out for him? Or does he have control over what happens to him? Now, we've got fair is foul and foul is fair. Now this is possibly the most important quote in the whole entire play. So at the very end of this PowerPoint, I actually have an entirely separate slide on just fair is foul and foul is fair. So this is not everything you need to know about it, but this again is paradoxical, okay? So it shows that their promises of greatness cannot be true. They are themselves a contradiction. They may seem to offer greatness, but they actually, in fact, don't. They will not bring the promises. They are contradicting themselves. Such an evil force cannot bring good. And ultimately you will corrupt yourself with this evil. You will almost be trapped in their contradiction. Now, this last bit, they hover through fog and filthy air. Now, I think there's so much we can symbolically say about fog. Fog to me symbolises how the witches blur Macbeth's logical and rational thought. And I love the idea that fog is literally symbolising how they are distorting his clear, loyal view, and they are corrupting him. He can no longer see the clear and righteous path. And it represents ultimately how they corrupt his goodness by doing so. And the connotations of filthy, of course, evoke a sense of dirtiness. They evoke a sense that the supernatural are disgusting and vile, which of course we know Shakespeare wants to portray. and that they are metaphorically corrupting society. They are dirtying society. They are almost a dirty taint on society. Right, okay, so if I was you, I'd pause the video just here. Make sure you've got your key scene annotated. Copy my annotations, reduce them down. Make sure you highlight the key quotes, draw nice arrows, just as we've done, just as you've done hundreds of times in class with me and hundreds of times before in other English lessons too. Right, now, before I move on to fair is foul and foul is fair, I do have a slide on that at the very end, which I want you to make a flashcard out of. I just want to go for some few high-level thoughts, some things that are going to stretch you to get the highest possible grades in your exam, and things we know we can say about the significance of Act 1, Scene 1. Well, okay, the presentation of the supernatural in the opening scene of Macbeth is ominous. There's a sense of foreboding. Okay, they instantly have the idea that the witches are bad. They're a malevolent force that are here to distort the natural order and the equilibrium of society. So instantly we see them as a bad thing, and that's really important because if we think about our knowledge retrieval, our brain dump we did right at the beginning, what was Shakespeare trying to achieve? Well, he wanted to warn us against engaging with the supernatural. He wanted to suggest to us that the supernatural was a terrible and bad thing. We've then got the pathetic fallacy, so the thunder and lightning. Again, it seems to symbolise the chaos and destruction they will bring. Now, a few really important points here. These last two are very important. The fact that the witches speak in troic tetrameter, that unnatural metre of speech, emphasises how unnatural the witches are, and it is a stark juxtaposition, so a severe contrast to the blank verse, so unrhyming iambic pentameter, which the nobles speak in. So you don't really need to know much about blank verse and troic tetrameter other than one is a very natural rhythm of speech, the blank verse. It is traditionally associated with nobles and high-ranking people. And troic tetrameter is a very unnatural metre of speech. And the fact that the witches speak in such an unnatural metre of speech and that starkly juxtaposes the blank verse and the very natural metre of speech of the nobles in the play evokes and adds to this sense that they are unnatural. Okay. Now, the significance of fair and foul is fair must not be underestimated. This is probably the most important quote from the whole play. The paradoxical language instantly highlights to the audience that the witches' lucrative promises of greatness will not come true. They are themselves a paradox because no good can come from engaging with such a malevolent force. Now, I shared this resource a while ago on Twitter, but rather stupidly, I only have it saved in my work desk space in my documents on my school computer. So I don't actually have the original PowerPoint slide here, but I do have this one, okay? And what I want you to do is I just want you to pause this because there are a few really important points on here and I just want you to have a look at those. I'll try and send you this photo in my email as well. So we've got about the troic tetrameter, we've got about the paradoxical language, we've got the idea of the coexistence of good and evil, okay? And the fact that fair could be a facade, Macbeth's facade of goodness, but foul is his ability to commit evil acts such as regicide. We've got the disruption of natural order and the great chain of being, and we've got the connotations of foul and what foul actually means. So if you pause the video, have a look at that, that will give you some really high level ideas. Okay, so that is Act 1, Scene 1 done. Act 1, Scene 2 should hopefully be uploaded today as well, so you may want to go on and watch that now, you may want to wait until tomorrow. There's absolutely no real rush, you don't need to watch all of the lessons in one go, but please make sure you're keeping up with them because these have got some really high level ideas, some really useful things that for both year 9, especially now because year 9 are at this point, but for you as well, year 10, that will really help you in your study of Macbeth. Okay, thank you very much. Have a lovely day, and I'm sure you'll hear my voice very soon.